My family went through something very tragic. We lost my mom to suicide, unfortunately. It was sudden, nobody expected it, and it was like the most difficult time of my life still till today. It was just such a place of such sadness and sorrow, but also just confusion of someone, being taken too early, the questions of why, and just laying there and yelling, it's not fair. And it was just such a tough time for me. And I think the good part that came out of it is that it did help me realize how much I need God and how much I need Jesus and to cling to them, and that in those moments when you're so far down like that, the only thing that's going to help you is clinging to them.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining the Higher Pursuit podcast. We are so glad that you're here. If you're looking for content that will encourage you, build you up in your pursuit of Jesus, and sometimes challenge you, then you have tuned into the right podcast. In case you're new here, the series that we're in right now is called Repurposing Our Pain. And today I'm joined by a wonderful guest, Allie Loiselle. Allie and I were introduced by a mutual friend, Stephen, who read my book, Repurpose Your Pain, and knew that Allie's story would be a great addition to this podcast and a blessing to a lot of you. So before Allie shares her story, I'll just share a little bit about her. So Allie's from upstate New York, near the Capital District, and she works for a pharmaceutical company, but she's a single mom. So for you single moms out there, you know what she is dealing with. She's juggling all the things. She's the mom. She's the dad. She's the carpooler. She's the taxi. She's the disciplinarian. She's the breadwinner. She is the rent payer, the house cleaner, the nanny, all the things. She's the nurse in the middle of the night. And she is the proud and busy mother of two daughters, Maggie, who's 8, and Vivienne, who is 6. Did I get their names and ages right?
Yeah, you did.
Awesome. Well, Allie, I just want to thank you so much for taking this time to join me on the podcast, because I know, like we were just talking about, I know your story is going to bless so many people. But before we get into your story, I have a little icebreaker question for you. If you were designing a t-shirt, what would the quote be that you would put on that t-shirt? What would it say?
One of my favorites would probably be, there's one out there that says that nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. And that is something that I use regularly as a reminder to myself when I'm feeling intimidated by someone or like I'm less than someone.
That's awesome. That is so, so great. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I would wear that t-shirt. I would totally wear it. So let's see. What color would that t-shirt be? I'll have to see if I have that color already.
I'd probably do it a darker color because I tend to go for black or gray. So I'd probably do it like a black, but give it like a nice bright color on it, like a bright pink or a yellow or something. So it pops.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I would wear that. I don't have anything black with bright yellow or bright pink, so I would wear that. Maybe we'll make it. All right. So Allie, I want you to share your story, why Stephen thought that your story would benefit my listeners. And then I'll interject from time to time some things that come to my mind, but I just really want to hear from you right now. So what's your story, girl?
My story is that back in August of 2022, my family went through something very tragic. We lost my mom to suicide, unfortunately. It was sudden, nobody expected it, and it was like the most difficult time of my life still till today. It was just such a place of such sadness and sorrow, but also just confusion of someone, being taken too early, the questions of why, and just laying there and yelling, it's not fair. And it was just such a tough time for me. And, I think the good part that came out of it is that it did help me realize how much I need God and how much I need Jesus and to cling to them. And that in those moments when you're so far down like that, the only thing that's going to help you is clinging to them. And just learning that helped me like grow relationships with my other family, my sister and my dad's. We grew so much closer through it because we really bonded then that, hey, time is, very precious and we want to hold on to each other, and value it while we're here.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So walk me through a little bit about, not to go into too many details, but, I know a lot of people have experienced people's sudden death, whether it is through suicide or a sudden illness. I know when COVID was really rampant in the beginning, a lot of people were losing their loved ones very suddenly, very unexpected. Nobody was prepared for that. And that was only 4 years ago. And it wasn't like it was 40 years ago. So this is still really, really fresh pain for a lot of people. What was your initial reaction? Like, walk us through your emotions when you first found out what happened with your mom.
I believe that my first emotions were basically, obviously, shock. I was actually sitting in the parking lot, with my kids about to go in and get their hair cut before school started. And my dad called me and was just kind of like, you need to get to your mom's house. Your mom's dead, and I just lost it. Like, I remember I just sat there and I just screamed no over and over again. And like my kids were hugging me and that, like they knew something was up. It was just heartbreaking. And like, I didn't want to believe it.
Did you have any inkling that would have led you to think that this could possibly even happen? Or was this literally so far out of the realm of reason?
Unfortunately, that's one of the things I think I kind of hate the most about it, is that it is something that can be predicted, because she was someone that she didn't care enough to take care of herself. She stayed on the same medicines for years that were doing nothing. And she always was someone that would kind of like threaten it or do stuff that was kind of like careless. Like, I remember as a kid, there was a time where she drank to the point where she was like passed out in the snowbank. And my uncle came over from next door and found her. So there were signs, and she was always kind of that way and struggled and was like one of the people, the typical type where like she was the biggest sweetheart, had the biggest heart, and people walked on her and took advantage of that. So it was rough.
So when you were dealing with your loss, were you also, because I know in my life, there have been some things that have happened, and after it happens, I've had almost like PTSD moments where I will wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my gosh, like I want to go back in time. Like if I could just dial the clock back by one day or 1 week, like I just need to go back. And then the realization, like I can't undo this. Like this is my life. This is reality right now. This nightmare is really happening. Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, definitely. I had like dreams where she would be there and it felt so real, like we were younger and we were like shopping in the mall together or something like that. And yeah, I wanted to go back so badly. And then not only that, but then those moments of like what I could have done to stop it, like if I was there in that moment, if I had gone over that night like I was supposed to, like stuff like that. So
that so many people experience that, Allie. It's just such a demonic tactic that somehow we could have stopped a tragedy from happening. And it's actually interesting because that sort of ties into a little bit of regret. When I write about regret in my book, I say, regret is like this fantasy of what reality would have been like if we had made a different decision. And we just don't even know that actually would have been the thing. But in our mind, we imagine that it could have been. And that's just a torment when you're already dealing with the grief and the loss. To have those emotions just pushing your head underwater when you're already drowning under the grief of not having your mom and having to lose her like that so suddenly. So, I mean, I'm sure that loss just left you confused. Did you ever experience, like, where did your emotions, obviously everything's really raw in the very beginning. So over time, what happened to your emotions over time?
I feel like once I got past the initial period of just, asking, why and being sad and upset, I think it got weird kind of for a bit because my sister and I both talked about it and we both kind of got to a period where we just went almost numb and couldn't cry and couldn't feel anything. And I don't know if it was just our bodies being, exhausted from already sharing so much emotion. But yeah, we just kind of went numb. But then, like, slowly over time, I don't know how, but, things started to get to the point where it was like, okay, so it is all right to laugh again. It is all right to, enjoy life, even though you're still missing her,
Yeah.
so to finally be okay with that. It's hard sometimes still because you don't want to. You feel bad for enjoying things. Like, how dare you enjoy things when she's not here? But
Yeah.
I know she doesn't want us to live that way.
Hi, everybody. While I hate to interrupt a good discussion, I do want to tell you about my book, Repurpose Your Pain, Moving from Pain to Purpose and from Instability to Firm Faith. In the book, I share 10 pain points that are common to most people, and I share my personal stories, my experiences with those pain points, and how I repurposed that pain. Then we dive into what the Word of God has to say about how we repurpose that pain. You need to know that this book is really 2 books in one, because it includes workbook activations to help you apply the truth that you've learned to your life. So grab your copy today on Amazon, Christian book distributors, or any place books are sold. Yeah. So for the listeners, I just want to point something out that what we are specifically talking about today is repurposing our weariness. And in grief, there's so many things at play. There's the death of dreams, because the dream is that we will have the prescribed amount of time with a person. Like Allie said in the beginning, her mom died too young. She was taken too soon. So you have the death of dreams. Then you have regret. Could I have done something differently? Or I wish I knew that this was going to happen. I would have spent more time. I would have loved more, prayed more, forgiven faster, made more time. All of those things that regret just imagines that we could have done if we had had a crystal ball. And then there's the confusion, and then possibly bitterness at God, or maybe bitterness at the person who died, oddly, for leaving us. There's all these things, and all of those emotions culminate together and pile on top of each other, and they drag out and they cause a weariness in grief. And Allie just described what happens at the peak of weariness, where you go numb because you have been under so much emotional pressure. Things have been so raw at such a high level. And the volume of the emotions have been so high, turned up to 10 for so long, that emotionally and physically, it's just like our body blows a fuse and our emotions blow a fuse and put us sort of in an emotional state of coma so that we can recover. But here's where the cycle of weariness, this is why we're talking about repurposing our weariness, because this place right here, either the grief, the regret, the bitterness, the death of dreams, or this numbness, when we stay stuck in that place, and some of you listening today are stuck. The person, the situation, whatever, this happened a long time ago, and you have been cycling around and around and around. You can't get out of your numbness. You can't get out of your bitterness. You can't get out of that place where your dream died and you're hopeless and you're angry at God. So I'm going to have Allie continue to share now what she did to repurpose that pain, because she has and is repurposing that pain. So Allie, can you just share with the people that are listening, that are hanging on your every word right now for this part? You were questioning God. You wanted your mom back. You were angry at God, angry at her, weary and numb. So this situation, this season, testing your relationship with God, what was the turning point for you? And how did you repurpose that pain?
For me, I believe that it started, fortunately, in the very beginning stages of grief, because I was part of a strong church family that helped a whole lot. No matter how much I wanted to fight and not see anyone, I forced myself, even though my mom had just died. We had just found out she died on Friday. I forced myself on Sunday to go to church. And as much as I didn't want to do it, I was so glad that I did, because I had those people to be there to remind me of their love and God's blessings and that, and just hug and love on us and be there. And they set up like a food train to send food to our house and everything and that. So just to have that was great. And to show me kind of right from the beginning that, hey, like, you still need God. Don't use this as an excuse, to run from him. And so that's kind of how I was made aware that I needed to stay planted, and I needed to dig deeper into my relationship with him. So from there, I kind of just started doing more Bible app plans on my app. So I would do the app, and I would also, though, go through and read the Bible. I made it a plan, like, over Christmas break and that, to read every chapter of Luke and stuff like that. And I just started doing things that got me more involved and closer to him, so I could learn that and focus and put my energy into learning more about him rather than focusing on the sadness.
So good. So good. Allie, do you mind me asking how old you were when your mom passed?
Let's see. When she passed, I would have been 29.
Wow. So folks, I hope you're listening to what Allie just said. Here she is in her 20s, losing her mom, and yet listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, telling her to stay connected, stay rooted in fellowship, dig into the word, dig deeper into her relationship with Jesus, and to focus on what really matters, her relationship with her sister and her dad, and make the most of the time in the relationship that they have, to be able to grieve together, but also to be able to heal together. I want you all as listeners to take those 3 keys, to think about what she has just said. Dig into the word, stay rooted in fellowship, focus on what matters. Because in our season of grief, it's easy for the enemy to pick us off. That's what he wants to do. He wants to isolate us and justify why we have every reason to be mad at God, to feel like the whole, the Bible is garbage, just chuck the whole thing. But Allie did the exact opposite. And it has brought strength and tremendous healing. Is there anything else you can think of that you did in this season and that you are doing in this season, Allie, that has helped you and is helping you repurpose that pain of the weariness of grief?
Another thing was just, like I said, just more staying rooted with God. I just got into connect groups with my church and that, where we do Bible studies and that. So I did one of them, and that was good because it gave me another also place to share some of that grief and that and talk with people. So,
oh, that's a huge key right there. That's huge, because even though we don't really want to talk about our pain all the time, it is so important to have that outlet. And in a small group setting, that's perfect, because I don't know how big your church is. The church that I go to, we're a couple hundred people per service on a Sunday. We have 2 services. But, when on a Sunday morning, it's, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, good. How was your week? Great. Have some coffee and we jet. But
Mhm.
it's in the small group setting, you really build relationships. You really make relationships. And I mean, you're a little bit on the older side, but I feel like that generation that's just below you really struggles in that because they're so on their phones.
Yeah.
Their idea of a relationship is social media or TikTok or like
Mhm.
viewing people's lives and rather than actually engaging in life. So, I mean, how do you respond to that to somebody who's like thinking like that?
To someone who's more the younger mentality.
Yeah.
With that, I just feel like you just gotta push yourself. You're never gonna know, like, if it'll help you or not unless you force yourself to get out there. Cause trust me, I'm someone that's extremely introverted and quiet. Groups of people scare me, like having to sit there and talk to people. So I forced myself into those situations and made myself be the one to speak out. And that gets me to the point where eventually you're not scared of that. You're not going to be in that state of mind where you're like, oh my gosh, not a social event, like you'll get
So
better
good.
and you'll get used to it.
So good. Oh, that's awesome. That is so awesome. All right. Well, Allie, I am so proud of you. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It can be an intimidating thing to do, but I'm so glad that you shared your story with us and how you are repurposing the weariness of bitterness. I mean, the weariness of grief, because like I said earlier, it's not just dealing with the loss. Grief is it's so layered. And there are so many people that are experiencing the weariness of grief and wondering, when am I going to get my life back? And I appreciate the fact that you talked about that you're reaching the point now where you can laugh again. And you're working through all the questions of, is it okay to have fun? Yes, it's okay to have fun. Mom would want me to have fun. Is it okay to be laughing and to be joyful and to be carefree? Yes, it's okay. Mom would want me to laugh and be careful and carefree. So, you're repurposing this in every season and through every emotion. And the way, guys, that she is doing it is with Jesus. And Jesus is the resurrection and he's the life. He is a living hope. He's the anchor for our soul. He is the balm of Gilead. There is no one that can heal that raw, open wound like Jesus Christ. He knows exactly where we hurt. He knows every thought we've thought. He knows our fears. He's the only one who can be there. We are up at 2 a.m, pacing the floor in a combination of anger and sadness. He's the one that we can pour everything onto. And Allie has done just that. So, Allie, do you have any last word of wisdom for anybody who is walking through this, or any comforting word, anything that you would say to somebody you're sitting across the table in Starbucks and they just got their coffee and they're pouring out their story? What do you say to them right now?
Well, like I've been saying through all this, I just say, cling to Jesus because he's the only one that's going to be there. Like you said, every hour he's going to be by your side and he's the only one that can solve those problems. He's the only one that can work miracles. So yeah, trust in him.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, Allie, the fact that you can be sitting here right now how long has it been since your mom's passing? 2 years?
Just over 1 year. It would have been 1 year in August of last year. Yep.
Wow. In just over 1 year, have moved so eloquently and so anointedly through that season of grief. And you're not through it, obviously. You're
Right.
still working through it, but repurposing the weariness of that grief um, in such a short period of time. That is a miracle, guys. For those of you who have been grieving and you've been stuck in deep places of grief for 4 years, 14 years, 40 years, I'm sure you're listening to Allie and going, wow, there are keys here that I need to put into play. Well, Allie, there's so much more that we could share. I just want to thank you so much for such a great discussion and for sharing your story with us and adding so much value to my listeners. Before we sign off, I just want to invite you all to join our live Q&A and discussion when it gets scheduled. So be keeping your eyes on my Instagram and Facebook to see when Allie and I will be chatting live on Instagram. And maybe you have questions about how weariness is impacting your life, and you want to ask her specific questions about how she repurposed her weariness into a deeper connection with the person of Jesus Christ. Or maybe you've been doing this work with God and you just want to share your story. We'd love to hear that. In our Q&A, you're going to have the opportunity to do that. So make sure to join it and share the link in your social media when it comes out so your friends and followers can join you as well. And for now, I just want to thank you, our incredible tribe, for being part of today's podcast. I'm here to help you and encourage you on your journey. So if anything you heard today blessed you, then please let me know in the comments. And also be a conduit of blessing so other people can benefit. Share what you learned with others. And you can do that by sharing things on social media or during a conversation at the water cooler at work or hanging out with friends. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And also make sure to join my website, my email list, on my website, higherpursuitministries.com, so you can receive my newsletter and my blog. Friends, we are on a pursuit of more of Jesus together, and none of us has arrived. But my goal for this podcast is always to offer you something nourishing that will strengthen, encourage, and challenge you as you pursue Jesus in the midst of your everyday and messy life. So until next time, I just pray that you walk in the favor of God, and I will see you in the next podcast. Allie, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day. Hey family, I pray that you were blessed and encouraged by that episode and that you took away something you can use in your walk with the Lord starting today. Jesus tells us in Matthew 6 to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So I thank you for making me a part of your pursuit. Until next time, abide in him.